Hey, good morning. If we haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name's Garry. I'm one of the pastors here, and we're wrapping up a series that we've been in for the past couple of weeks called Anchored, where we've been taking a closer look at this thing called faith, because regardless of where we find ourselves in relationship to God or a higher power, whether we believe a higher power exists or God exists, every single one of us has faith. Faith in someone or something that we think, believe, trust will come through for us as we make our way through this thing called life. If you missed any of those messages, you can catch up online or on our app. I'd encourage you to do that. That clip, of course, was from Disney's first installment of what is now a franchise of the Pirates of the Caribbean, but that was the best, arguably the best, I think, anyway, called The Curse of the Black Pearl. And it's the adventures, the high sea adventures that follows the quest of the sometimes misunderstood, frustrating, but always lovable pirate named Captain Jack Sparrow, played by Johnny Depp, beautifully played by Johnny Depp, and Will Turner, his sidekick, a resourceful blacksmith, as they both try to fight and keep Elizabeth Swann, the love of Will's life, out of the clutches of the feared Captain Barbossa. That's what the film's about. And like the ride at Disneyland, if you've ever been to Disneyland, that's what everyone goes for. This movie just wants you to keep watching it over and over and over because there's so much action, you just can't catch it all the first time. And it's one of those few movies, it's over 2 hours and 20 minutes long, but it goes by like that. Unless you don't like pirate movies, and then it feels like 2 weeks and 20 minutes. But that clip, I know it's fantasy, but you know what? I cannot help but see a lot of resemblance between how life can sometimes be like that. And here's what I mean. Have you ever felt like the people on that ship? That something in your life is bearing down on you. And it's coming after you. It's threatening to take you out some way, somehow. And sure, it may not be a boatload of zombie pirates that are on your tail, but there's a pirate of some kind. It's maybe a past regret. It could be a poor choice that you made financially, relationally. Or maybe it's nothing that you did or anyone else did. It's just life. Because we know how random life can be, right? Just we can't explain what's happening, but it's happening nonetheless. You know, it's smooth sailing. Things are going great, and then out of nowhere, a storm rolls in. A relational storm, financial storm, a health storm, and it's left you scrambling to stay afloat. And whatever it is we're up against, it has the potential to shipwreck our lives. So what do? We do what the crew on that ship did. We began jettisoning things, right? Only, unlike the crew, we don't throw barrels and crates full of supplies over. No, you know, we jettison things like common sense, reason, logic, morals, integrity, honesty, whatever we think we need to get rid of in order to help us get through whatever it is we're going through. But my favorite part of that whole scene was the anchor. When they drop the anchor, and we see it bouncing along the bottom, and all of a sudden it just grabs that rock, and the ship heaves over, and there's splintered wood going everywhere. I mean, it's epic. And I'll be honest, those few seconds kind of bring to life the metaphor that we've been using in this entire series, which is we've been comparing our faith to an anchor. Because just as an anchor, sailors and fishermen trust in an anchor to hold and help them get through a storm, we too do the same with our faith. We count on it, we trust on it to hold us in place when life comes at us. But here's the thing. You know, as brilliant as an idea it was to drop that anchor, it wouldn't have done the crew any good had they just believed that it was a good idea, just nodded their heads and said, yeah, that's a really good idea, but didn't actually drop the anchor. Wouldn't have done any good. The same is true when it comes to our faith, which in the context of this series we've defined this way. That faith is having confidence that Jesus is who he said he is, that he is good, he can be trusted, and he will do what he's promised to do. And one of the things he promised was, we will have trouble in this world. But he also promised that he will give us everything we need to make it through. All the strength, all the courage, all the grace, all the mercy. And we can believe that. We can believe that to be true. But if we want to experience change, if we want to experience transformation in our lives and grow in our relationship with God, it only happens when we begin to live that belief out. I've been what you would call a believer most of my life, in that I believe that God loved me so much, loved all of us so much, that he came to this planet as a baby boy. That's the Christmas story. And I believe that he lived among us, showed us a better way to live life, to do life, and live in a relationship with him and with each other, and then was crucified on a Roman cross, but 3 days later, walked out from the grave. That's the Easter story. And through that, we all have a way to connect back to God. I've believed that for as long as I can remember. But I wasn't always what you would call a follower. And if I'm honest, my relationship early on with God was about one thing. That was going to heaven and avoiding hell. That was it. And once I kind of figured that out, just because that sounded like a pretty good option to me, I didn't really care if I had anything else to do with God. Here's why. Believing in God was easy and safe because it didn't infringe on me at all. I didn't have to change the way I lived my life. It didn't require anything of me other than mental assent that, yeah, I agree that God loves me. He died, rose again, and because of that, I have a way back to God. So you could say, you could wrap up my philosophy of faith this way. It's better to believe from a chair than to follow out there. It's better to believe in a chair than to follow out there. Because out there is uncomfortable. Out there might cost me something. Out there is unknown. But, and I'll throw this out there for you to consider, out there is where our faith will actually begin to grow. But fear of what God might ask us to do is often what keeps most of us in our seats and from taking that next step to moving toward him and moving from being a believer to a follower. Which raises the question, well, what is the difference exactly between a believer and a follower? Well, there's a famous German author, pastor, former POW, respected theologian. His name is Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And in one of the books he wrote while he was in prison, he wrote this. He said, the problem is that many people believe the right things in their heads about Jesus, but do not follow him. The solution, Bonhoeffer continues, is discipleship, which can be summarized as, and I love how he puts this, believing what Jesus believed, living the way Jesus lived, and loving the way Jesus loved. James, the half-brother of Jesus, just think about that thought for a minute. Your brother claims to be God, kind of, right? But James, the half-brother of Jesus, didn't believe him for a while until after Easter, and then he was like, oh, maybe, right? Here's what James wrote to a bunch of first century followers who were believing the right things about God and Jesus, but they were kind of struggling trying to live that whole faith thing out. And so here's what he writes. Listen to this. What good is it, dear brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith but don't show it by your actions? Can that kind of faith save anyone? Suppose you see a brother or sister who has no food or clothing and you say, goodbye and have a good day, and stay warm and eat well. But then you don't give that person any food or clothing. What good does that do? So you see, faith by itself isn't enough unless it produces good deeds. Unless it produces good deeds, it's dead and useless. You want to know what a follower looks like? Jesus describes it beautifully in some words that he shared with some people that were learning and from him and watching him. And he's talking to a bunch of people who are on the side of a hill one day, and he says to them this. He says, listen to this. This is what a follower looks like. You are the light of the world. You are the light of the world. Like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and then puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it can give light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see so that you can get a pat on the back. Actually, it doesn't say that. It says, so that everyone will praise your heavenly Father. In other words, it'll be pointed back to God. So in essence, what Jesus is saying is, look, I'm inviting you into something more than just believing. I'm inviting you to live in such a way that your faith shows up and stands out. In a way that people will just take notice and go, wow, I can't believe that. These people are different somehow. But you know what? Here's where I struggle. Maybe this is true for you. Is that often I can see that and I want that. But there's a part of me that just doesn't trust God. I just think he's going to get me to do something I don't want to do. But here's the thing, in all of that, the only way we can learn to trust God is to start following him, to start putting into action what we believe is true. And that's the rub. Because it's freaky to follow him, but unless we follow, we can't trust. And so we get stuck in this circle. We learn to trust God when we take what we believe to be true about him and put it into action. And yeah, that is risky. But think about this for a second. I think the bigger risk is what we could possibly miss out on if we choose not to follow. You know, the Bible is chock full of stories of people who have stepped out and taken what they believe to be true about God and Jesus and actually put it into action. And we talked about a couple of those a couple of weeks ago. Noah, God said, hey, it's going to rain. He believed it's going to rain. And so he acted on that belief, put it into action, and built an ark. He comes to Abraham, he's the other guy we talked about, and said, hey, Abraham, I want you to go to this land, I'll show you, and I'm going to make a new nation out of you. And he believed that to be true, so he did, and he moved on. Peter is another guy, we talk about him a lot around here. He's another one of those people that took what he believed to be true about Jesus and put it into action. And we see this in a story. It happens after Peter's introduced to Jesus, and Jesus makes the invitation to him. He looks at him, he says, you're kind of rough around the edges. You get up into people's grill, and you're kind of moody and short-tempered, but you know what? There's something inside of you, and I want to call it out of you, so why don't you come and follow me? And Peter is like, okay. And so he leaves his fishing business and heads off and begins following Jesus. As Jesus goes around town to town, teaching, healing, pulling off this wild stuff, and he's just blown away. Well, one evening, after a long day of teaching, Peter and some of the other guys that were hanging out with him, Jesus comes up to me and he says, hey guys, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take this boat and go to the other side of the lake, and I'll meet you over there. I'm going to go spend some time by myself, but I'll meet you over there. So they're okay, and they hop in the boat and they start to row. And at first, everything's great. It's a nice evening on the lake, just casually rowing along. And then out of nowhere, a strong wind begins to blow. And the waves begin to build. And they keep building and building. And then they start pounding over the bow. And soon they find themselves, Peter and the rest of his buddies find themselves doing everything they can do to keep from sinking. And at about 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them walking on the water. When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified. I get it. I would be too. In their fear, they cried out, "It's a ghost." Understandably. But Jesus spoke to them at once, and he says, "Don't be afraid. Take courage, I'm here. I know things look crazy, and everything's pressing in on you. But it's okay. Don't be afraid." And then Peter called him. He says, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water." You gotta love that, eh? And Jesus said, "Yeah, come." And so Peter went over the side of the boat and walked on water toward Jesus. Did you catch that? He actually walked on water. Can you imagine that? How awesome would that be? No more lineups for BC ferries. It's like, see you later, suckers. Yay, God, right? How awesome would that be? But here's the thing in all of that. If Peter would have never experienced that had he not gotten out of the boat. If he had not taken what he believed to be true about Jesus and just stayed in the boat, he would have missed out on all of that. And you know what? I wish the story ended there. I wish it ended with, and Jesus and Peter held hands and walked to the beach together. But it doesn't end that way. Here's how it ends. But when he, Peter, saw the strong wind and waves, he was terrified and he began to sink. "Save me, Lord," he shouted, and Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. Now, isn't that the part of the story, of Peter's story, that kind of mirrors our own story? I mean, who here hasn't desperately longed to make a change, to experience some kind of transformation in our life, to do something different, to take a chance to step out? And so we take that idea and we think, "Oh, that sounds so good," and we start to roll it around, and it becomes more and more compelling. And it gets us to the point where we actually step out and we take a risk. And we believe and hope, and we say things to ourselves like, "You only live once," and "I'm going for it." And for a while, we take a few steps, and it's looking really good. But then the wind and the waves and the fear come in. And so it's tempting to just want to stay where we are, to just keep doing what we've always done because it's safe, it's predictable, it's comfortable. Better to believe in a chair than to follow out there. But just like Peter and so many others, Jesus is calling you and I to do something that's the opposite of business as usual. He's inviting us you and I, to get up out of our chairs, to get out of our boat, to toss that anchor and do something, and not just for the sake of doing it. We all know how busy we are. We don't want to just add something else to our schedule, but because that's the only way we are going to move closer to God and learn to trust him. That's how we move from being a believer to a follower. And you know what? There is no better place to do that than right here, in this place, in this family, in this tribe. We have all kinds of teams full of awesome volunteers, some that have been serving almost since day one when this church started, who make what happens here every Sunday possible. We have setup teams, takedown teams, music teams, media teams, lighting, sound, kids, youth, young adults, greeters, coffee. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. And there's always, always room for more people. I have never, in my history of being here, said, "That team's full, we don't need anyone." There's always room for a team. And I'm going to do something we never usually do around here. I'm going to tell you right now, we have some teams that are full of some awesome people that are stretched right thin. And if it wasn't for those people that are serving on those teams, taking that on their shoulders, it wouldn't happen. So good on them. Some of the teams that jump to mind are Kids Place. Our takedown team, the guys that roll the carts up and down, that's a big one. Our video and lighting teams. Now, I say that not not to make you feel guilty or anything. I say it for actually the opposite. I say it because we don't want something from you. I don't want something from you. We have something for you. Here's what I mean. This past week, I just kind of randomly sent a text to a bunch of people I know that serve here. And I just asked them a simple question. Here was the question. What has been the biggest benefit to you in serving at the meeting place? Some of them were like, oh, never thought of that. Here's one here. That's how it starts. Great question. Never really thought about it until you asked. But here goes. The biggest benefit for me in serving is that I feel far more connected to the whole experience of my journey with God. There are many upsides for me to serve, and I see no downsides to it at all. I also know many more people now by serving than I would have ever met by not serving. In short, serving just makes me feel good, and all the benefits of doing that are free, and they end with this. It's a smoking deal. Here's another one. I think the biggest benefit is how close it's brought me to being in a community at the meeting place. The relationships I've made through serving with other people has helped bring me closer to God. The biggest benefit, though, is that I now have people in my corner for when life comes at me. And I know there's people in this church right now that are going through some medical stuff, and their team is rallying around them big time. Here's another. I burn calories. It's true. If you're on the video team, you do those stairs quite a bit. Biggest benefit in serving? Here's another one. For starters, it makes me feel closer to God, feeds my soul, and helps me see Him at work, and lets me feel like I'm a part of that. Serving has connected me with people I would otherwise never have met. People who are now my deep friends and I deeply care for. And as a non-social person, don't miss this, as a non-social person, this is huge. And they sent that in caps. And then they said at the end, and I get to play with some really incredible toys. But I think this is the one that floored me the most. The biggest benefit for me serving at the meeting place is it saved my life. Knowing that I had to show up and serve week in and week out with a bunch of people kept me sober. These people are now my closest friends. And serving with them, well, it's just plain old fun. I mean, how awesome is that? God is doing some amazing things here at the meeting place. And we want nothing more than you to be a part of that so you can experience God personally in your own life, working through you to help transform the lives of other people. That is the best part of serving. When you see someone have an aha moment with God because of something you did in conjunction with a bunch of other people. And so if that's something, if you're sitting there thinking, oh, okay, maybe I should do something, you can sign up at the address on the screen, themeetingplace.org/volunteer, or sign up using the connection card in your program, or you can go to the app and go under the Get Connected section. However you want to get there, we would love to plug you into a team. We'll try and pair you with your passion, something you really love to do. But nonetheless, we would love to have you be part of a team because there's something there for you. That is putting your faith into action, and you will begin, your relationship with God will completely change. And here's what's really cool. If you're sitting there and you're thinking, oh, that seems so scary to me, I don't know what that's going to mean, just remember, Jesus is there, holding out his hand, saying, it's okay to step out of the boat. I got you. And you never know. You just might walk on water. Really glad you're here, and I'd invite you to pray with me. God, sometimes it's hard to move from that believing in our heads to following in our hearts and putting that into action. But throughout the centuries, throughout history, the church has been your light that's shone into the dark places of cities, towns, homes, lives. And you invite us into that. And it's when we say yes to that you can show up and our faith begins to grow deeper and sink in deeper. So when we're faced with a storm, our anchor will hold. And we thank you that you love us that much. And we pray this in your awesome name. Amen.